How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Was blind, but now I see.
This grace that taught my heart to fear,
And grace my fears relieve.
how precious did thy grace appear.
The hour I first believed.
Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory.
Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory. Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory. Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting?
How sweet the sound of this victory.
Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. When we've been there for 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun.
Good evening to everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Preacher Talk, episode 3 of Preacher Talk. We're glad to be here on today. And today I have with me Dr. Kenneth Kemp, the pastor of the Antioch Church in San Antonio, Texas. He also has the unique perspective of not only being a pastor, but also a medical doctor. And so I thought it would be great for us to invite him in. Their church is also part of the National Baptist Convention of America as well. And so welcome into our broadcast of Preacher Talk, Reimagining the Church. And so Pastor Kemp, we've been having conversation every week on Monday, just about candid conversation about coronavirus and how it affects the church. It's called Reimagining the Church. So we're going along that theme because we know that this pandemic has caused us to view the church in a different way than what we have been accustomed to doing. It has broken up our norm and what we know church to be. And so all of us have had to kind of get out of the box and get out of our comfort zones in order to adjust to the pandemic. So I thought it'd be great to have you on today to talk to us and give us a medical perspective as well as a pastoral perspective of what it's like and what we should watch for as we go through this pandemic. So just give us some words of greetings to start off our broadcast, Pastor Kemp.
Certainly. Thank you, Pastor Wilson. We appreciate you for allowing us to come and share with the great Galilee Missionary Baptist Church. It's a pleasure to be with you. Well, this whole thing of COVID-19 is a bit confusing. There's so much information coming out. Sometimes I feel like it's like trying to drink from a fire hose, because the information does change quite frequently. I think that the general thing to keep in mind is that the virus can be spread and spread fairly efficiently by people who may or may not have symptoms. And so we have to remain diligent to continue with social distancing, even as our economies are opening up. People are going back to certain businesses. Churches are reopening for in-house worship. We need to maintain that diligence because the virus is still in our community. And it certainly is devastating in terms of its ability to cause rapid death, as all of us are aware now, having dealt with this virus going on 3 months. So it's a difficult situation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So tell us a little bit about the coronavirus, just that whole scientific. I know we've been seeing pictures
Right.
of it. So tell us a little bit from a medical perspective about coronavirus.
Well, the coronavirus is one of a family of coronaviruses. So when we say coronavirus, we're really talking about a family of viruses. The particular virus that causes coronavirus 19 disease or COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2. And this virus has a lot of similarity to another coronavirus that caused SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, that was initially diagnosed or initially discovered in 2002, 2003. And that virus actually also originated from China. But the new one that we know about, SARS-CoV-2, is 80 to 90% similar to the first coronavirus that caused SARS. So now we have SARS-CoV-2. And this virus, as I said, is one of a family of coronaviruses because the coronaviruses can cause a common cold. So this particular one, though, is different. And it has an RNA core. It has a protein capsule, if you will, and it has little spike proteins that project from the capsule. And those spike proteins are the ones that are responsible for the antigenicity, or in other words, they're the component of the virus that leads to the production of antibody. And so that spike protein is what many researchers are concentrating on at this point to try to determine how you can develop an antibody to the spike protein that can be used for a vaccine. And also ways that you might figure to prevent the spike protein from attaching to the membranes of cells. Because viruses are so tiny, they don't actually have the mechanisms within their own viral components to reproduce themselves. So what they do is they enter the host cell, hijack the cell's components, mechanisms for reproduction, and then that's how the virus then reproduces itself. So if we can find a way to prevent the virus from attaching to cellular membranes and incorporating itself into the cells, or we can find a vaccine that will target and kill the virus, then we'll be light years ahead, if you will, and how we might be able to maintain control and or eliminate this virus.
So what are we looking at as far as a time frame of this thing hanging around? You know, you talked a little bit about the vaccine. We talked a little bit briefly before the show about maybe having to find a way to live with this virus, life with it. So talk a little bit about that. Is this something that's going to be hanging around and something that we're going to have to adjust to?
I think it is something we're going to have to adjust to. I really do. And the reason why I say that it's severalfold. First of all, the virus is brand new to us. We've only really been dealing with it for the last several months. And in order to develop a vaccine, it usually takes months, really years. Really think about it. What you're doing is you're trying to develop memory in your immune system so that when you are exposed to the virus, those memory cells can come into play and kill the virus? Well, first of all, then you've got to be able to develop antibodies to the virus, and then you have to be re-exposed to the virus to prove that the vaccine works. Well, not too many people are going to be willing to voluntarily be exposed to COVID-19, and that wouldn't be an
Right.
ethical thing to do. So, with
Right.
that sort of caveat in mind, you can pretty much understand that this is not a simple process, and it's not something that you can just do in a matter of a few weeks or even a few months. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's one big problem. The other big problem, which a lot of people don't really know, is that the COVID-19 virus can change itself. So
Wow.
it's not always the exact same virus from place to place or time to time. Sort of like the flu virus. The flu virus can do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to eliminate the virus, we got to find, or at least control it. We've got to find that part of the virus that does not change, and that's a tricky thing for the virologist to do. Find that part that is consistent throughout.
Yeah.
So to develop that kind of vaccine, to have the numbers of people that are part of the studies, so that you have some comfortability in its effectiveness and safety, will require time,
Mm.
a lot of time actually. So it is quite ambitious to think that we would be able to have a vaccine before the end of the year. Now I say that, but I also have to throw a caveat in there, and that is because the SARS-CoV-2 virus is similar to the previous SARS virus that we talked about. Remember, we talked about there was a coronavirus that was responsible for SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, and there was another coronavirus that was responsible for a similar illness called Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. So we already know something about those viruses. That gave us a head start for SARS-CoV-2.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a head start, thankfully, but even with the head start, it's still going to take quite a bit of time. Even if we develop the virus,
Mm-hmm.
even if we develop the vaccine, we still don't know how effective it's going to be until it is given to persons, and there's another round of COVID-19 infections in our community. So you
Mm-hmm.
see, more than likely, we're going to have to be prepared to deal with this virus being in our community for some time. Hopefully not as bad as it has been here in the last several months, but it is something
Mm-hmm.
that we'll be prepared for.
All right, a question from our chat room that kind of goes along with that particular response you gave. I want to get to it, and then I'm gonna go back to you, Sister Harrison. But I want to put this in since it's a part of what you just got through talking about. Would a vaccine developed this fast even be safe?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, but that would be the biggest concern in my mind. If you develop a
Mm-hmm.
vaccine really quickly, then you don't expose or you don't have a large population base for the testing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've seen in a number of studies with new drugs or new agents that in the study population, the drug appears to be relatively safe, but then when it's put into the general population, some of those things that didn't come out in the study, you begin to see. That's happened a number of times in medicine. So the question of whether it would be safe is a very
Mm-hmm.
big question. And of course, we depend on the Food and Drug Administration to help us in determining safe drugs in the United States. A lot of times people
Right.
malign the FDA because it slows down the process of developing new drugs, and it increases the cost of development of new drugs, but it serves to protect the public. And so we definitely need the FDA to be involved so that it puts those stops on the sort of too rapid development, sometimes which is fueled by this idea of profit.
Okay. All right. A little bit with that is a question. Are there any vitamins or foods or anything to ingest that might or could combat this current virus or even remove it?
No,
All right.
absolutely not.
No.
No. What you can do for general health is just make sure that you're eating a balanced diet, that you're keeping your weight under control. Certainly, you can take vitamins to help with your just general health, but there's nothing that you can do specifically that will control COVID-19 through a diet or through ingestion of vitamins.
Wow. So this sister Dunzel Harrison, she had a question about why does it attack the kidneys? And I guess with that we can kind of talk a little bit about how it has been affecting the African American community in a higher rate than it has other people from a death standpoint. So let's talk a little.
Okay, I'll try to address the first question. Why does it attack the kidneys? Well, a virus, any virus, has what is called tropism for certain types of cells in the body. The tropism for SARS-CoV-2 is primarily the lungs. In fact, there have been autopsy studies looking at where the virus deposits within the body of people who unfortunately have passed away from the illness. And the virus has primarily tropism for the lungs. That's why most people have lung symptoms. But for some others, it not only does it go to the lungs, but it can also go to the kidneys. It can go to the brain. It can go to the liver. It goes to all over the body, essentially, although it concentrates primarily in the lungs. So why it goes to the kidneys, I can't tell you exactly why. I just know that it acts like many other viruses in that it can go to all parts of the body. And in certain people, it attacks the kidney and causes a significant reduction in kidney function. So now the next question is, what about African Americans, right? Why is it that African Americans seem to be getting this at a higher rate than others? Well, I think the first thing we need to keep in mind is that African Americans aren't getting it at a higher rate than other persons per se, but we are getting it at a higher rate than what is comparable to our percentage of the population. So what I'm saying is we make up, 13%, 14% of the U.S. population, but we also are acquiring this infection at about a rate of about 30% or so. So while we only make up 13, 14%, 30% of the COVID-19 cases are comprised of African Americans, or about. This is a changing number. And the other thing to keep in mind is the data that is reported by the CDC does not include 100% of all those people who have been infected. In other words, if, for instance, you develop COVID-19, your doctor reports that you have COVID-19 and does not report your race, then you would not be included in the database in determining the frequency of SARS-CoV-2 among the races. Okay, so everybody's not counted, but of those who are counted, about 30% or so are African Americans. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is that the numbers who die are substantially less than the numbers who acquire the infection. African Americans are also overrepresented in the number of persons who die as a result of COVID-19. So what that says to me is a number of things. Number one, it says that perhaps we are getting it at a higher rate, but who knows whether we're being reported at a higher rate. than
Wow.
those who may acquire it and or die from it and not get reported. Okay, that's one. The other thing is uh, African Americans have uh, for generations been overrepresented in those chronic medical conditions that have been associated with severe infections with SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. And that is something that has not changed just because we now have this novel virus in our community. Those chronic
Mm-hmm.
conditions are hypertension, uh, heart disease, obesity, diabetes. Uh, all of these conditions have been reported with increased severity of COVID-19 infections. So, since we already have those conditions at a higher rate than the rest of the population, that, of course, logically puts us at a higher risk of developing a severe infection. The real question
Right.
is, why do we have more high blood pressure and diabetes and obesity? Um, those questions have been raised for years. Why do we have more heart disease than everybody else?
Right.
No one has
Mm-hmm.
come up, in my mind, no one has come up with an adequate answer for that. But the things that people always talk about are the social determinants of health, which include access to medical care, compliance with medical care, not only access to medical care, but equitable treatment once you get into medical care,
Mm-hmm.
poverty, um, homelessness, um, lack of job opportunity, training. All of these things will affect how you are able to take care of a chronic medical problem. And I believe a lot of it has to do with all of those things, all of
Yeah.
those things. And we've got to do our part as African Americans to make sure that we're maintaining our general health. And number two, recognizing that we are at increased risk and doing what we need to do to reduce our risk as much as possible.
Right. Right. So there are some things that we can do personally to kind
Yeah.
of help reduce risk as well.
Yeah. So personally, first thing you need to do is stay 6 feet away from everybody else. Okay. This is not the time to be hugging, kissing, spitting, and rubbing against one another. Stay away. Okay. You got to recognize that because this is how the virus is spread. It's
Yeah.
spread through
Yeah.
close and intense contact from
Yeah.
human to human. So
Right. And
you got to do
someone has a question on that. How far can that travel, that sneeze or that cough travel?
well, it can vary, but the standard line is 6 feet will keep you away from most people's sneezes and coughs.
Right.
And so I believe if you stay 6 feet away, you're less likely to be in the range of someone who sneezes or coughs. I know in the state of Arkansas, for instance, their governor has put out recommendations for people who sing in a sanctuary or who preach in a sanctuary that they should be 12 feet away from everybody else. Because as
Wow.
you are using this increased effort to sing or to preach, that might lead to a greater I guess, a greater distance of
Mm-hmm.
respiratory secretions being
Mm-hmm.
expelled. I don't know how true that is. I know that's what the governor of Arkansas has done. But
Right.
I think the most important thing is since we know that they can travel within 6 feet, stay 6 feet away
Okay.
at the very least. So that's
Right.
one thing. The other thing we need to do is we need to be wearing those cloth facial coverings. In
Mm-hmm.
Texas, wearing the cloth facial covering is, optional. The governor has recommended, but has not enforced the use of cloth facial coverings. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important for us to do because again, we're at increased risk. So
Right.
you want to protect yourself, and then you want to protect the others who are around you. So wear the cloth
Right.
facial covering. Just do
Right.
it.
Right.
Wash your hands frequently. Those are some of the basic things we can do. And the other great big thing that we need to do is make sure your high blood pressure is under control, your diabetes is under control, that you're eating right and exercising, because those things put you at high risk.
Yeah. So real quick, we were just when we were talking about that in the mask, and I know one thing that I've noticed is many of us are not wearing the mask, or either we're
Right.
not wearing the correct way. So a person has it, but they got it on their chin, or
Right.
they have it over. I mean, it's just all types of stuff I'm seeing about,
Right.
how to wear a mask or just not wearing it at all. So what's the correct way to wear a mask?
Correct way to wear the mask is to have it over your nose and mouth with
Okay.
a tight seal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're wearing cloth facial coverings for the most part. What we wear in the hospital are the sort of the medical grade masks, and we have to get fitted for those masks. Every year, I have to go to a fitting for my N95 mask,
Oh,
and we
wow.
mold them and we make sure that they cover our nose and our mouths, and we are checked to make sure that they don't leak. Okay, now
Mm.
my fit is the same every year. I get upset because they make me go do it every year, and I
Yeah.
say I haven't changed. But every year, by regulation, we have to get checked. Well, we're not
Wow.
doing that in the community, right? So we're not doing it
Right.
to that degree. But at the very
Right.
least, you need to have your nose and your mouth covered with a relatively tight seal. So if
Mm-hmm.
your nose isn't covered, the thing spreads through respiratory secretions. And the respiratory
Mm.
secretions come from your nose, your mouth, and your lungs.
Right.
So how stupid is it to wear a mask with your nose out?
Right. Right.
Okay, that makes no sense.
None at all.
Absolutely
Right.
not. It's more comfortable,
Right.
because it's uncomfortable to have something over your nose. But you're
Right.
not protecting yourself. You're not protecting anybody else. You might as well just take it off. Okay.
Right. Right.
And if it's loose, you're not protecting yourself or anybody else either. The other thing is when you take the mask off, don't touch the outside of the mask. Try as
Mm.
much as you can to touch the edges or the inside of the mask, because then
Wow.
you're just
'Cause
contaminating your hands. Yeah.
wow. Wow. So that's cross contamination, huh?
Yeah.
Man.
And wash
Okay.
the mask, you know.
Wow.
It would
Mask.
be
Okay.
very unsanitary of you to wear a nasty, torn up mask.
Right. Here's a question from Brother Donnie Sutton. What are they treating patients with during their hospital visit when they're suffering from COVID-19? What's the treatment plan right now for COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a long answer. I don't have time to answer it all. Let me answer what I know to be sort of the standard these days in most cases. The first thing is remdesivir has been
Mm-hmm.
approved by the FDA, basically on an emergency use authorization basis. It simply means that uh, there aren't a whole lot of studies to absolutely prove that this medication works, but the largest, what's called a randomized prospective trial, has been done with remdesivir, and it has shown an enhanced time of recovery. So people have less time of infection with when COVID when remdesivir is prescribed for COVID-19. There's some controversy about that because there's another study that did not show any response at all out of China. Nevertheless, that's the standard now. Remdesivir is what probably everybody's going to get. Everybody who needs it will get oxygen. People who need it will get medicines to keep fever down, antipyretics they're called. Um, and depending on how you do, some people may need additional oxygen or they may need mechanical ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
If it affects the kidneys, some people might need dialysis. So any number of things can be prescribed depending on how the patients respond. But these days, the standard of treatment for people with severe COVID-19 at least moderate to severe COVID-19 would be remdesivir. If you have mild symptoms, you may not require any treatment at all. In fact, a lot of people have been infected with COVID-19 and have no symptoms at all.
Wow, right. There's a question right here. When the vaccine is developed, how will persons be chosen to participate in the experimental group? And should the elderly or African Americans be put in that experimental group?
Okay, so first of all, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. But the experimental group, when we say the experimental group, what we're talking about is the study group of people. In the study group, the folks who will be selected for that will depend upon the people doing the study, the folks in charge of the study. And so I'm sure, and I say I'm sure, I guess I shouldn't say that because it's not always the case, but most investigators will try to have a diversity of people within the study population. Sometimes that's not the case, but that will certainly be the goal. Now, I think for us as African Americans, while we should be a part of the study population, what we absolutely need to be a part of is the first group of folk who get the vaccine once it's found to be effective and safe. So I've told a number of groups that once we've been told there's an effective and safe vaccine, we who are African Americans need to beat feet to get it. Because we're at higher risk. We've already talked about that. And I know some people are concerned about, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I can't take vaccines because I get sick every time I take one. I got all that. But this thing has no real cure. So if we do get an effective and safe vaccine, if at all possible, you need to try to get to it as soon as possible.
Yeah. I have one from Sherilyn Prescott. Will you please share why it's equally important to protect children at this time as well? I know there's more information coming out about how it may or may not affect children. At one point, we thought they were kind of immune to this. Now we're discovering it may have an effect on them. I know these youth sports. My son's baseball coach called and he was like, "Hey, man, we starting baseball practice next week." And I was like, "Nah, man, we not starting baseball practice next week." So talk a little about that. Yeah.
Well, children were never considered immune from the infection, although some people kind of took it like that. We already knew from the very beginning that children could be infected with COVID-19. What it appeared to be, though, is that children seem not to get severe infection. Even when they got infected with the virus, they seem not to have a lot of symptoms. So they were likely to be asymptomatic, or if they had any symptoms at all, they would be mild. What we've found more recently is that those children who get those asymptomatic or very mildly symptomatic infections, within about a 4-week or so period later, can get this really severe multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And it can affect the kids' hearts, their entire bodies, their muscles, their abdominal system. And it looks like a disease that I learned about when I was in medical school called Kawasaki syndrome. And quite frankly, that was so long ago, Pastor Wilson, when I was forced to take care of little kids. I can't even remember half the stuff that Kawasaki syndrome is associated with. But what I do know, it's associated with severe inflammation. And so now we're seeing the kids develop that, and not at a large number, thank the Lord. It's not a large number, but there have been a few who have developed it in several different parts of our country. So, and we just need to be very, 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 very careful. The majority of kids who are exposed or who are infected with COVID-19 will do just fine. But they may also transmit it. So you might have a little one that's asymptomatic, and that little one is around an older Sunday school teacher, and then the Sunday school teacher can catch it. You see,
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
so it's nobody gets a bye here, from the young to the old. Nobody gets a bye. We all need to be careful.
Right. Right. And I know they're contemplating how they're going to do school again. And what would you say to
Yeah.
parents that are even having to make that choice? With all of this going on.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. My children are adults now, so um, if it was me, I would be extremely careful. I think the the one thing that I would look at is what what's going on within the community in terms of COVID-19 transmission, and that varies from region to region, city to city. If you have a high level of COVID-19 transmission in your community, I would not send my children to school, and I recommend that you don't, despite
Wow.
what the government says.
Right.
If there's a high
Right.
level of transmission. On the other hand, if the level of community transmission is low or non-existent, I think we're going to have to make a very difficult decision to resume some of our activities, but resume them in a way that maintains social distancing as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I would think that you have to make that on a region by region, city by city basis. Trust but confirm what your um, political leaders are telling you, because some of them
Mm-hmm.
are making decisions not for the best of the community, unfortunately, but for political reasons. Uh,
Yeah.
so check it out yourself,
Yeah.
and see, what kind of transmission is going on in your community.
Right. Right. Three more questions, Pastor Kemp, and we're gonna let you get us on out of here. Thank you for spending this time with us. I know you're working hard both
Sure.
ways, so I appreciate it. Real quick,
Oh, yeah.
please explain what and what not a person should do during their 14 days of quarantine.
Wow. Um, Well, first thing, make sure you maintain activity. When we are in confined spaces and we're isolating or quarantining, sometimes we have a tendency to kind of veg out. So you got to maintain your physical activity, um, eat right. Again, try to maintain activity of your mind, reading, if you plan to do that. If you're good at, if that's something that you like doing, puzzles or whatever it is, something that will engage your mind, and then maintain contact with people who care about you and who love you. Get on the
Mm-hmm.
phone or get on Zoom or go to meeting or Skype or whatever, and maintain that physical, if not physical, that emotional, spiritual contact with people.
Yeah. Thank you for that. This one question: if I have patients with asthma, do I need to make any changes to their daily asthma preventative management regimens to reduce their risk of getting sick with COVID-19? That's a loaded question.
Yeah. Um, I don't know who asked that. Is Tamika a health professional? Do you
Must
know?
be, yeah. I see that. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Sounds like she's a health professional. Um,
Yeah.
I would say the answer to that is just do what you always do. And that's what I'm doing with my patients. When they call me up and I have some who have severe lung disease, and they say, what can I do? I said, well, what you can do is maintain social distancing like everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Because you are at increased risk, you got to make sure you do what is the basics like everybody else. There's no change in the medication regimen, nothing like that. No special tricks. Just
Yeah.
maintain the social distancing like everybody else.
Right. Can you give a word to our senior members? I know I see through the phases as we continue to reopen, just a word of caution
Yeah.
about about staying at home if possible, as much as possible.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend that persons who are older and who have chronic medical conditions would continue to worship at home. I know Pastor Wilson and the Galilee Church are providing virtual worship, and you
Yes,
can
sir.
worship remotely. Keep doing that until we're certain that the community transmission of COVID-19 is nil. And I
Right,
say
right.
nil for those of us who have chronic medical problems because we're at higher risk of dying from COVID-19. So let the young
Yeah.
folks go out there and they get exposed first. And if they don't get sick, then the rest of us can come. Hopefully, that I'm just being facetious.
Yeah.
What we want to do is we want to make sure that nobody gets sick.
Right.
We want to make sure that
Right.
nobody gets sick. So
Absolutely.
what I'm doing at Antioch is once I'm certain and our leadership is certain that the community transmission of COVID-19 has had a sustained decrease over at least a 2-week period, and we're getting close to that in San Antonio. Then we'll come back in the sanctuary at a limited basis, and the people who come
Okay.
to worship will wear masks, gloves. We'll check their temperatures before they come in. They'll sit 6 feet apart, and we'll do all of those things to get started. And then if everything goes well and nobody is sick and the community transmission doesn't go up, then we'll increase that.
Right.
And once we are increased and the level of COVID-19 appears to be extremely decreased, then I think that's the time when people who are a bit older and have chronic medical problems can come back to worship.
So from your projections, when are you all looking at going back in any
Well,
capacity?
in fact, I just told our congregation on Sunday that if everything remains so that we don't have a spike in COVID-19 cases, we will look to come back into the sanctuary the first Sunday in June. Now,
Okay.
there are some churches in our community that have already gone back.
Wow.
The Catholic Church in San Antonio will re-enter for Catholic Mass on the 19th, which I guess is tomorrow. Some of you may have heard of the Cornerstone Church, John Hagee, one of the biggest churches in San Antonio. They went back supposedly on Sunday. But we've determined that we want to see this thing be consistently low and not have spikes. And then if that is the case, we'll go back the first Sunday in June.
All right.
Whatever
I
you
saw.
guys decide to do.
We're gonna try to I'm gonna stay a step behind as a leader.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want us to become like the lab test for this situation. Like I don't
Right.
want to be a part of the experiment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
I
I
get
would. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
I mean,
smart.
yeah, that's for that's for everybody's sake, and then personally for my family's sake. We got a new baby in the house. We got
Yeah.
children. I mean, listen. I mean, even though I'm at an age where they say I'm perhaps not at risk, man, I'm not volunteering to get this thing. I don't want it.
I got
I
I
don't
got
want
you.
it. I
That's
don't
smart.
want it whether my chances are good or not. I don't want it. I don't even want to take that chance. And so we're gonna
Right.
step behind, and we're gonna let everybody else go in front of us, and we're just gonna wait on the Lord on that one.
I hear you, man.
But I tell
Yeah.
you this, virtual church has been good for us. It has really helped us
Yeah.
to connect. I mean, with a widespread of people that I could not have even imagined us being able to reach right now. So it's definitely been a blessing for us. But I just wanted to just take some time to continue to equip the membership and the people that we have about what's going on. It's hard really to make a decision as leaders because there's so much information. You have your government leaders, they're playing games with each other. You got different sets of instructions on how to go about this thing. You got the CDC with one set of instructions, then the White House gives you another set of instructions, and you say to yourself, man, what is going on? And so to have this unfiltered conversation about that, I really appreciate you. Are there any words you want to give us as we leave tonight?
Well, first of all, again, I want to say thank you, Pastor Wilson and Galilee Church, for giving me this opportunity to share with you. I have been recently doing a lot of conversations about COVID-19. The mayor put me on the health transition team, and as well as the economic transition team for San Antonio and Bexar County, and we provided some recommendations to the mayor and to the county judge. But as you pointed out, Pastor, um, what we said was not what the mayor and the county judge did. And
Right.
what the mayor and the county judge did was different than what the governor said.
Right.
And it's
Right.
interesting that the governor, or at least the attorney general from the state, wanted to accuse our county judge and our mayor of going too far and not
Wow.
paying attention to what the governor said. So I share with you that this concern about different instructions from different people.
Right.
But what I say to any pastor, and I say this to any church and any church member, we've got to prioritize our health.
Yeah.
We love Christ, and certainly He is number one in our lives, and we serve Him on a continuous basis. We serve Him continually.
Right.
Whether we're in a sanctuary with someone sitting right next to us, or whether we are calling upon His name through attending a virtual worship.
Right. Right.
We
Right.
serve God continually. But
Right.
we've got to make individual decisions about our health.
That's right.
And we got to trust our pastors, our leaders of the church, to direct us in a way that will maintain our connection with Christ and will also preserve our health.
Right.
That's our priority. So
Right.
I tell my leadership, I said, I understand what the county judge says, I understand what the mayor says and what the governor says, but really what matters to me more than anything else is the health of the members of the Antioch Baptist Church. That's what
Right.
I'm going to be following as I'm trying to make decisions.
That's right. That's right. And so, in closing, just give us a little bit about what reimagining the church and what church service will perhaps look like through this pandemic.
Okay, well, I think when we get back, when we get back to worship, it's going to look a little different because there'll probably be fewer of us in there at first. We may have to wear some masks or some gloves, but we'll still be worshiping a mighty Christ.
Right.
We'll
Right.
still be lifting Him. And I can't even imagine the joy and exuberance of the members of the body when we're able to come together again.
Right.
We got to make sure, though, that that at least for now, we're not hugging and handshaking, kissing. We may not be able to gather in a small group at the altar. Maybe we won't be passing the collection plate. Maybe we have to do communion a little differently so that people aren't all touching the same amount of bread in a plate. You know, some of those things we might have to do. But the Christ that we serve is sovereign. The coronavirus is called coronavirus because it has a crown. It looks like it has a crown on electron microscopy. But I'd say it's a pseudo crown. The real crown is with the Christ. And He's in charge of that.
Yes, sir. I'm a preacher. I knew where you were going with that one. Dr. Kemp, I love you. It's good to see you. Thank you so much. Tell my big brother Patrick Stewart to come on home. I miss him.
Oh man, stop. Love you too, man. Appreciate it.
All right, see you later. Thank you.
All
All right, see you. Bye-bye.